Rave culture originated during the mid-80s with emerging popularity of house music. Thousands began to descend upon outdoor and illegal events and festivals to dance in front of sound systems. At its peak, an estimated 40,000 attended an event thrown by the Sound System Vision in 1992 at Popham Airfield. It was a transgressive and new youth movement that brought the thousands together within sound system culture, music, dancing, politics and drug use. It has evolved and changed in various ways through the years, but every weekend, someone somewhere will be preparing to establish some form of rave. Its transgressive nature has meant it has not always had a harmonious relationship with law or popular culture, and has been subject to targeted legislation and police crackdowns. In 1989, a year said to be the second summer of love, rave culture was reaching its peak of popularity and hit the headlines for the first time. In a political climate that saw Thatcher claim there is no such thing as society, in times of youth uprisings and political revolution, there was fertile ground for a transgressive youth culture emerging. The rave culture was in full swing.
Tell me something, you can't play bass?
In a society becoming increasingly fragmented, people became united under liberal values, strange fashions, new music, ecstasy and a feeling of acceptance. Promoters would take control over warehouses, fields, barns, abandoned buildings, and just about anything fit for a party. In a time before mobile phones, news of parties would be spread by releasing numbers in the small ads of newspapers or through pirate radio stations. Locations would be kept secret and arrival to raves were often done in huge convoys to ensure it was not shut down by police. Lengths of raves would vary from one night to 5-day festivals such as Castle Morton in 1992. This is what has been known as the golden times of rave culture. The transgressive culture gave people a community and collective identity. Fueled by the popularity of ecstasy, rave culture was one of acceptance and togetherness. One sound system or representative of this best was the Exodus Community Project from Luton. They're a politically active community-based sound system that epitomises the rave community's counterculture ideals.
Hello, if you're ringing up for Exodus information, there is a free party tonight. Meeting point Woodside Estate in Dunstable. Convoy leaves at midnight.
So we called it Exodus because we knew it would be a lot of people looking to go to this kind of dance rather than that kind of dance, and live this kind of life rather than that kind of life.
So Exodus was born as an organisation to provide free parties for people.
Exodus, at their peak, took the original ethics of free partying further than any before them. Exodus took a DIY approach to party culture, bringing in crowds up to 10,000 people, and based upon donations from they attracted, they invested profits from their parties into renovating derelict buildings for the homeless and various community projects to rejuvenate areas that are in social crisis in the Luton area. Exodus themselves lived in a once derelict nursing home. Using their various skill base, they converted into accommodation for 30 people. Members comprised of ex-soldiers, reformed criminals and any other walks of life. They had turned their back on 9-to-5 society to attempt to bring rejuvenation to the community of Luton from the bottom, and along the way through some parties that go down in rave culture legend.
Derelict buildings, derelict people, waste.
No, it's not your stereotype, a bunch of squatters with needles in their arms and things like that. It's a group of young and old people dedicated to doing something for their life and others.
The organisers of such events have illegally squatted in various properties in and around the Luton area.
They used to tip rubbish over the side here. There was old scrap motors in the field.
Somebody donated loads and loads of pallets. I seen a big load of pallets. I thought, oh, well, there's plenty of firewood. They turned that firewood that I thought was firewood into buildings.
Given that some of us were roofers, some of us were ex-plasterers, stuff like this, started making the floor good. And then when the Department of Transport representative came round who owned the building, instead of like the ruinous squatters that he expected to see, he saw people putting roof tiles on and stuff like this, you know what I mean?
Eventually we were given tenancy of the farm.
They were, however, subject to intense investigation and what many argue is intimidation from authorities. Many claim members were scapegoated by the police and blamed for a rise in the use of ecstasy. This came to a head when one member was arrested for the apparent possession of 2,000 ecstasy pills. The Exodus Collective to this day are dubious as to whether this was a plant. The truth may never be known, but the case was eventually thrown out on grounds of insufficient evidence. Ecstasy and drug use has, however, always been a defining feature of rave culture and a part of a transgressive culture that made it notorious and hedonistic in equal measure. Those at raves have spoken that ecstasy gave an empathetic community feeling to crowds that made those attending feel they are part of something. The growing segregated society in which the culture was born meant this no doubt gave an appeal to the community feeling of togetherness where those attending raves speak of, whether drug-reduced or not. However, the rise of drug use did not go unnoticed by the authorities or the media, and cases of ecstasy deaths were linked to rave culture, and a moral panic and a high-profile report by the press ensued. Most notorious was the death of Leah Rotz, a middle-class 18-year-old who tragically died having took ecstasy the night before. Despite an inquest finding no link to ecstasy as a cause of death, and a complication of fluid retention being to blame, ecstasy was nonetheless blamed and have fueled a moral panic surrounding rave culture. A panic surrounding rave culture has been present, however, since it first hit the headlines in 1982, and stretched beyond isolated cases of tragedy or public nuisance, and into Parliament and public policy.
The Criminal Justice Act of 1994 sought, among many other provisions, to clamp down on illegal raves. For the first time, there was an attempt to define a musical form in order to criminalise it.
New powers were given to police to clamp down on illegal raves, and for the first time, certain genres of music were actively targeted by legislation. The relationship between rave culture and the law is intrinsically turbulent, as the nature of a transgressive subculture transgresses not just social norms but goes beyond the law itself. This has led to a cat-and-mouse game between police and rave organisers for years. While organisers often do their best to leave locations as they found them, there have been high-profile cases of property damage and harsh crackdowns by some constabularies. Controversially and legally questionable, police brandished tasers to shut down a recent rave in this clip. Free partying or rave culture today has changed a lot since the famous summer of 1982. Music has evolved from acid house and jungle to a predominantly drum and bass and trance scene. Social media and mobile phones have made it both easier to organise and for police to find locations of raves. Attendance have never revived from the tens of thousands of the early 90s, with the largest attracting around 3,000. Predominantly within the scene, politics and community projects are far less apart. The popularity of ecstasy in its original era was replaced by what has been described as an epidemic of ketamine use that hit the headlines, causing bladder problems, and its sedative effects have been blamed for taking the spirit out of raves. The rise in the sale of nitrous oxide from industrial and medical canisters also began leaving venues littered with discarded pressurised containers and balloons, bringing those more interested in making money than having a good time. However rave culture has evolved, and its image, drug use, music and meaning, it will always be a place for people to come together for parties that organisers risk a lot to establish. Perhaps in the current climate of social inequality and calls for social change, it could again one day take on a more political stance. As been said, however, hippies kept the pills but not the politics. With the free party scene is still parties thrown by the people for the people, away from expensive nightclubs and mainstream society.